They said the throne would never fall silent. They said its hum was eternal, a low, patient heartbeat beneath the skin of Terra itself. They lied. I was in the catacombs beneath the coral spire when I first heard the absence. It was not a sound, but the end of one, like a note cut short by the universe forgetting the next bar. The air went thin. Candles guttered though there was no wind. The servo skulls circling above froze mid-orbit, their machine spirits whimpering in binary tones I had never heard them use. I touched the wall of the passage. Once it had thrummed with power drawn from the palace miles away. The echo of the throne's golden arteries pulsing through stone and scripture. Now it felt hollow. I am Inquisitor Darian Vale, Ordo Malleus, and this is the night I realized faith makes a sound when it dies. The catacombs led to the lower vox crypts, a warren of whisper lines and mirrored halls where the Emperor's psalms were transmitted to the hives above. There I found the choir custos kneeling in oil and candlelight, his face gray with disbelief. "It's gone," he said. "No title, no bow. Just that. What is gone?" I asked, though the question felt rehearsed, as if my mind needed the ritual of denial. "The pulse, Lord Inquisitor. The throne's pulse. Every relay, dead. Even the astropaths. They don't sing anymore." He turned. Behind him, dozens of astropathic conduits hung from the ceiling like veins cut open. Their ends dripped black coolant. The spirits that powered them had fled. Above us, the cathedral bells began to toll. Not in worship, in warning. By the time I emerged onto the surface, Terra's sky had changed color. Not darker, not lighter, just wrong. A bruise without pain. The stars that should have been hidden by smog now glimmered faintly, as though distance had become impatient. Pilgrims filled the avenues. Some screamed that the Emperor had ascended, others that he had abandoned us. Both were lies. Both were prayers. I made for the grand basilica of the throne sublime, pushing through bodies that smelled of incense and fear. The closer I came, the more the world tilted. Gravity swayed like a drunk. Psychers clutched their heads and wept. Servo lamps blinked in strange rhythm. The warp pressed close, curious. The custodes at the gate stopped me. Their armor was dim, gold turned to ash in the half-light. "No entry," one said. "The regent has sealed the sanctum." "On whose authority?" "His own," I almost laughed. "The Emperor's corpse commands more than you now?" The custodian's hand went to his spear. I saw the tremor in his knuckles. Even gene-crafted demigods can feel the chill when certainty cracks. I stepped back. There is no victory in dying to prove a point. Hours passed. Reports arrived by the minute, each worse than the last. Segmentum solar. Astropathic link. Lost. Segmentum tempestus. Navigators blind. Segmentum ultima. Warp storms rising along every trade route. Terra's own orbit. Unstable vox feedback. Unexplained gravitational eddies. It was as if the galaxy itself had exhaled. The ecclesiarch broadcast from the basilica's outer balcony, voice amplified through relic horns. "Brothers and sisters, the Emperor tests our devotion. Pray louder, and he shall hear." The crowd obeyed. The noise shook dust from statues, yet no warmth answered. I watched from the edge of the plaza, vox recorder humming at my belt. "Faith does not echo," I muttered. "It absorbs." At the 13th hour, I received a sealed communique from the High Lords. Its sigil burned through my gloves, an old trick to remind us obedience should hurt. To all agents of the Holy Ordos, contain panic. Preserve hierarchy. The throne is in meditation. Meditation, they use that word. The corpse god of 10,000 years was meditating. I tore the parchment in half. Symbols of command mean nothing when written on denial. By nightfall, the riots began. The first was at the transit spires, where pilgrims fought administratum clerks over tickets to nowhere. The second erupted in the manufactorums when workers demanded overtime pay and food instead of faith. The third happened in the Basilica district, a mob trying to storm the sealed gates, convinced that if enough blood touched the marble steps, the Emperor would awaken. Arbite's lines broke within minutes. Even shock malls cannot strike faster than despair. I commandeered a chimera and drove through smoke that smelled of incense and promethium. The city's lights flickered, whole sectors blinking in and out as if the grid itself couldn't decide whether to believe in electricity. From loudspeakers I broadcast one order. Hold the lines. Protect the innocent. Preserve the idea of tomorrow. Most didn't listen. Some did. That's always enough to begin again. Past midnight I reached the palace perimeter. I had clearance, though the custodes barely acknowledged it. They stood motionless before gates larger than hive spires, eyes fixed on nothing. Behind them, the bridge to the sanctum shone faintly. Light without source. A tech priest intercepted me. His mechadendrites twitched like nervous fingers. "Lord Inquisitor," he rasped. "The throne's core output has dropped to 0. Yet, there is still power. We cannot locate its origin. Define power. Residual, unaccountable energy, resonating through the webway locks. It hums, like breathing." "Breathing?" He nodded, lenses widening, as if something beneath the throne inhales when we speak his name. I dismissed him, but the image clung to me. The throne breathing, not dead, dreaming, or feeding. Inside the outer sanctum, the air was thick with incense and formaldehyde. The custodes had sealed the inner doors. None were permitted to view the golden throne, but rumor travels faster than decree. Some claimed the emperor's body had dissolved into light. Others said his mouth opened for the first time in millennia, whispering a single word no one understood. One terrified adept swore the corpse had turned its head toward Mars. I did not see. I only heard the silence. Silence so vast it bent thought around it. I recorded then. To whoever finds these vox logs, know this. The throne's light has died, but the machinery of worship continues to turn. Like a corpse still walking through reflex. We are witnessing the moment when faith outlives its god. The vox clicked. Static like ocean surf. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard breathing within the noise. Steady, patient, imperial. I cut the line. Morning came without sunrise. Terra's horizon glowed faint red, as if the planet itself blushed from shame. The ecclesiarchy announced a new edict. Every citizen must maintain constant prayer rotation until the light returns. They renamed the curfew the vigil. Anyone caught silent for more than an hour would be considered heretic. So we prayed, and the silence grew heavier. I met with my interrogator acolyte, Marin. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands shaking from caffeine rations. "Do you think he's dead?" she asked. "No," I said. "I think he's listening." To what? To what comes next. That night, I stood on the highest balcony of the coral spire, recorder in hand. Below me, billions of lights flickered, each one a human being refusing to stop existing. From orbit, it would look like faith survived. Up close, it looked like fear pretending to pray. I spoke into the vox. There is no throne now, only the echo of its weight. The Imperium has mistaken obedience for belief, ritual for purpose. Perhaps the Emperor did too. If he can hear us, he will know what I mean. We built a cage of devotion and called it protection. Now the cage is empty and the guards still march. Lightning forked across the smog clouds, illuminating the silhouette of the palace. Vast, wounded, magnificent. I ended the recording with words I had never allowed myself before. If faith breaks, let it break clean. What survives will be real. In the following hours, Terra stopped receiving transmissions from Luna. The Mechanicus fleets vanished from auger range. Somewhere in the dark, the first warp anomalies bloomed like tumors. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is only the first night. The hollow throne. Tomorrow the silence will learn to speak back. It has been 3 days since the throne went quiet, though time feels feral now, unleashed, pacing in circles. Terra's clocks still tick, but they measure nothing anyone believes in. The city hums under false daylight cast by burning Prometheum towers. Smoke coils where prayers used to. Even the air smells mechanical. Like a machine forced to keep breathing after its master is gone. I haven't slept. Sleep feels like betrayal. I walk the lower hives with an Arbites escort. 10 officers in cracked armor pretending the world hasn't ended. Their visors reflect the ruinous neon of shop fronts turned shrines. People burning incense in vending machines, begging for ration bars as if they were relics. A woman presses a picture of the Emperor against my chest, leaving an oily handprint on my coat. "If he's listening," she whispers, "tell him to blink once." I tell her I'll try. She cries in gratitude. I don't have the cruelty to correct her. Silence has a mass. You can feel it in the bones of buildings. The vox relays buzz with static that tastes like metal. Astropaths sit in circles, blind eyes weeping black tears, muttering fragments of numbers that never repeat. The Adeptus Mechanicus insist it's interference, not absence. They call the void a signal variance. Faith reduced to terminology. Our species' favorite defense mechanism. But I hear something else in that static. A rhythm almost too slow to notice. Like the heartbeat of a dying god, waiting to see if anyone mourns correctly. In the Basilica precinct, the ecclesiarchy holds processions every hour. Choirs of 1,000 voices sing hymns so loud they drown artillery. The preachers call it courage. I call it panic at the volume of the truth. They think if they shout loud enough, the warp itself will mistake noise for prayer. I watch the crowd move like a single organism. Thousands kneeling and rising in mechanical unison. It is the most terrifying beauty imaginable. Faith operating on muscle memory. At the same time, riots bloom in the manufactorums. The arbits crush them, but it's like stamping fire with your bare hands. The flames always find new air. Workers scream that their pay is worthless, that food shipments have stopped. The administratum responds with decrees printed on parchment, older than the riots themselves. One governor executes 50 people on a live Vox feed, calling it an offering to stability. Another shoots himself mid-broadcast. The feed cuts to the Aquila emblem and stays there, bleeding static like an open wound. I retreat to my quarters in the coral spire, but even there the silence follows. My servo skull, Model 7C, repeats the same phrase every hour, no signal detected. The voice grows softer each repetition as if embarrassed. I begin to think of the skull as a child apologizing for something it can't fix. I order it to stop. It obeys, but the quiet left behind feels heavier than the noise. I record this in my Vox log because confession is the only architecture left standing. Marin enters, pale beneath the candlelight. "The choir custos requests you, Lord Inquisitor," she says. Another anomaly. Her voice trembles. She hasn't eaten. I follow her through the corridors. The choir chamber reeks of ozone and burnt flesh. Dozens of astropaths sit rigid in their harnesses, eyes rolled white, blood threading from nose to chin. The custos approaches, his robes soaked crimson at the cuffs. "They started singing again," he says. "But not words, just the same note." I ask to hear it. He hesitates, then activates the relay. The sound is thin at first, then thickens until it feels like it's inside your skull. A single unbroken tone that bends between sorrow and command. Machines nearby begin vibrating to its pitch. The custos crosses himself. It's as if the silence learned a language, he whispers. Then, just as suddenly, it stops. The astropaths slump forward. 4 are dead. The rest mutter one word over and over in perfect synchrony. "Wait," I ask how long. They start screaming. We seal the chamber. I leave with the word burning behind my eyes. Wait, for what? Salvation, judgment, or permission to die? In the streets, rumors mutate faster than plague. Some claim the throne hums again, but only for the pure. Others say they've seen custodes carrying empty armor through the palace gates, as if returning shells to a god that no longer fits them. A traitor swears he sold a relic that glowed when fed blood. I confiscate it. It's a child's toy, still sticky with sugar. The High Lords have gone silent, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy like insects curling under bark. Every order now carries the scent of desperation disguised as piety. I intercept a Vox transmission marked Sanctioned Broadcast. It's a looped sermon telling citizens to preserve their hope through orderly prayer rotation. The same voice repeats every 20 minutes, perfectly identical, even in the pauses. I trace it to a server hall. Inside, I find only machines. The ecclesiarchy recorded the voice of a dead cardinal and left it on repeat. Humanity praying to an echo of itself. Night returns but doesn't feel like night. The sky's color never resets. The clouds hang too low, stitched with lightning that refuses to strike. Marin joins me on the balcony. She asks if I believe the light will return. I tell her belief is irrelevant. The universe doesn't barter. It takes and leaves. She laughs without humor. "Then why record these logs?" she asks. "Because someone should remember correctly," I say. "When faith breaks, people rewrite the story. I'd rather leave the truth, even if it hurts." Below I see movement. Pilgrims dragging massive statues of the Emperor through the streets, hauling them toward the river. They chant, "He walks again." When the statues reach the edge, they tip them into the black water, cheering as if resurrection can be achieved by drowning. The river takes them without sound. The cheers dissolve into sobbing. One statue's head remains above water, its eyes full of rain. I can't look away. At dawn, the Mechanicus request an audience. Their Magos Biologus reports spontaneous failures in cybernetic devotion protocols. Translation: servitors praying on their own. Some kneel mid-task and refuse to move. Others whisper psalms they were never programmed to know. One self-immolated before a forge altar chanting, "I am loyal." The Magos asks if I think this is divine intervention. I tell him it's contagion. Belief infecting metal the way rust infects steel. When I return to my quarters, the Vox array crackles to life on its own. Static fills the air, but beneath it a voice whispers, "He still watches." It's my own voice, recorded earlier, spliced and distorted. I disconnect power. The static continues, faint and persistent, like breath behind a locked door. I sit in the dark, waiting for courage or exhaustion, whichever arrives first. Morning doesn't come, just a lighter shade of gloom. Reports flood in. Ships attempting blind warp jumps, entire fleets lost. A cruiser called Saint Vigilant re-enters real space over Mars. Crewless. Hull covered in hand-etched prayers from the inside. Someone wrote them until their fingers broke. The Mechanicus quarantine it. I request access. Denied. They fear what it proves, that something answers when you pray into a vacuum long enough. I end this log beneath the basilica arches. The marble sweats moisture from the heat of so many candles. I kneel, not in faith but in fatigue. Around me, others kneel too. None of us speak. We simply listen to the silence pressing its weight against our ears, shaping itself into meaning. Maybe this is how gods begin. Enough people listening to nothing until nothing starts listening back. If anyone hears this, remember, silence is not peace. It's a waiting mouth. And tonight, Terra listens with it. In the following hours, Terra stopped receiving transmissions from Luna. The Mechanicus fleets vanished from auger range. Somewhere in the dark, the first warp anomalies bloomed like tumors. But I am getting ahead of myself. This is only the first night. The Hollow Throne. Tomorrow the silence will learn to speak back. The first executions began at noon, because noon is when shadows are shortest, and authority thinks it looks tallest. I watched from the edge of the Manufactorum Square as the governor's men erected a scaffold from loading gantries. Purity seals slapped over rust like bandages stuck to old scars. They had painted a slogan across the catwalk in quick, anxious strokes. Obedience is hope. It dripped the way hope always does. Crowds gathered because crowds always gather where a line pretends to be a wall. Workers in heat-scabbed overalls. Vendors who had nothing left to vend. Children with the steady eyes of people already older than their bones. The arbits formed a cordon with shock malls lowered. Boots planted on the precise line where authority believes it becomes permanent. I recognize Captain Kess by the set of her jaw. She always bites down on orders like they taste of iron. The condemned were marched out in a chain. 15 figures in gray. A priest with a voice like gravel recited their sins in a cadence meant to prove that the story had an ending. Incitement. Hoarding. Blasphemy. Doubt. That last word dragged, as if he knew it didn't fit with the others. Doubt is not a sin. It's a tool we are forbidden to sharpen. The governor arrived with a flourish of black-hemmed robes and an entourage of data scribes who pretended they were not afraid of sunlight. He climbed to the catwalk as if ascending to a sermon he had not earned, lifted a vox horn, and gave the speechmen like him are issued at birth. Citizens, he said, in times of trial we must renew our vows. The throne tests us. We answer with order. The crowd listened because listening is safer than speaking. I looked at the faces of the condemned, and I chose one to carry in my memory so that the others wouldn't disappear into arithmetic. A woman with ash in her hair and a bruise on her cheek shaped like a question. She met my eyes without flinching. If she begged, I didn't hear it through the static of what was about to happen. Kess, I said, low enough to be mistaken for prayer. This will break the city. It will hold it for one more day, she answered. Who told you holding is enough? No one who sleeps well. The first body dropped. Some cheered. Most didn't. The rope creaked like an old choir boy's voice. When the third fell, a man in the crowd whispered, "No." Not to stop anything, but to prove he still knew the difference between orders and meaning. By the 10th, people had practiced not looking. The priest raised his hands. Witness, order. The crowd obeyed, because obedience asks less of you than belief. I did not intervene. I will not lie to you, whoever you are. I chose the violence I did nothing to stop. If I had drawn my rosette and shouted, this square would have become a crater of meat within minutes. The governor's guard had heavy weapons positioned in the upper windows. Their barrels black holes with laws inside. I saved no one. I made a list instead. Later, lists become knives. When it ended, the governor bowed like an actor who thought the play had been about him. Kess gave me a look that said, "Your turn." I climbed the catwalk and took the horn. The governor hesitated. Then he saw the rosette and remembered who he had been pretending to be in the presence of an inquisitor. "Citizens," I said, the sound of my own voice larger than it deserved. You are told obedience is hope, but obedience without purpose is scaffolding around a grave. Today you saw punishment. Tomorrow you will see provisions. You will see water lines that work and ration packs that are not mold. If you do not, I will return to this square with the names of men who promised you order and fed you ash. Murmur. Heads lifted. Eyes narrowed not with trust but with the first sting of curiosity. The governor tried to take the horn back. I did not let him. And you, I said to the men with lists, you will take down the scaffold at once and turn it into benches. You will seat the weary there. Think of it as penance for speaking louder than mercy. The priest scowled, his rosary clacking like a chain. Lord Inquisitor, the spectacle is over, I said. Go write a sermon that does not require a rope to make sense. I left to the sound of things being disassembled. It is not redemption. It is weight, shifted slightly from the neck to the hands. The square dispersed into habits, to cues, to rumors, to hunger. Ash drifted from the manufactorum stacks. It landed on tongues like the body of a saint ground too thin. The city is learning new sacraments. The first is to watch. I walked the gantry bridge toward the administratum spire where the governor's office hung like a tumor. Marin matched my pace, a half step behind, eyes shadowed by nights that had forgotten where morning lived. You can't win two cities at once, she said. The one out there, she nodded at the streets, and the one in their mouths. I'm not trying to win, I said. I'm choosing which part of the story is allowed to harden. You sounded like you believed it. Belief is a tool. It used to be a god. It still is, I said, and did not add, just not ours. Inside the spire, everything smelled of paper and disinfectant. The governor's chamber was cooled past comfort, as if failure bred a fever he was trying to sweat out of the air. He stood by a window that did not open, looking down on his empire of nervous rectangles. His eyes had not yet learned how to exist without an answer. Lord Inquisitor, he began, and stopped when he realized he had no title for me that gave him power. I apologize if the measures offended your sensibilities. Necessity is rarely beautiful. Staging a liturgy of strangulation is not necessity, I said. It is theater for men who do not know how to speak softly. He spread his hands. The people require examples. Then show them men with sacks of grain instead of men at the end of ropes. You have promethium sequestered in Vault 19. You have water tanks rationed for parades. Empty them into the city. He blinked. Those reserves are for state use. The state is the people, I said, and watched the words bounce off the fossil in his chest. You do not have to understand a sentence for it to be true. You only have to obey it. His mouth tightened at the word. Obey. He preferred to rent obedience over purchasing it with his own. We have orders from the High Lords, he said, producing a parchment with a seal that meant a functionary had chosen wax instead of courage. Maintain hierarchy. Preserve ritual. No deviation from sanctioned methods. Methods like hanging doubters for being able to count? I said. You are reciting a catechism called Yesterday. It keeps you warm and makes the floor slippery with blood. He gestured toward the window. Do you hear them? The crowds. They need structure. They need bread. We are a world of industry, not a pantry. You are a man with keys, I said, and put my hand on the desk so that the rings of my rank clicked against its polished surface. Open doors, or I will learn how to open skulls. He stared, something like a prayer forming in the back of his throat and dying before it found teeth. You would depose me? I would weigh you, I said. If you rise, you keep your robe. If you sink, someone hungrier wears it. He gave orders. Reluctant ones. They went out through ducts and levers to rooms where men who owed him nothing listened anyway. Because survival has a sound the body recognizes. Vault 19 began to drain. Water wagons rolled. Somewhere, a scribe wept because a column of numbers he had always loved no longer added up to his name. I left him standing at his window, learning how to be afraid of righteous things. On the plaza below, the scaffold had become benches. People sat as if they had been waiting forever for wood to learn humility. Children climbed the frame, turned the gallows into a jungle of laughing angles. I do not believe in prophecy, but images are clever. They wait inside you for moments like this and say, remember me when you are asked whether there is hope. Kess met me at the base of the spire. The ash on her armor made her look like a statue being excavated badly. Rations are moving, she said. We had to crack a few heads, but fewer than usual. How many of your people were hit back? Enough for pain to be shared. Good. She raised an eyebrow. Pain that travels alone becomes law, I said. Pain shared stays human, she grunted. There's a rumor you should hear. Rumors are the city's pulse. You measure survival by their rhythm. Someone's preaching a new order in the low hives, calls himself the Confessor of Ash, says obedience is the first sacrament of the new silence. No throne, no light, only rules. Where? In the blind levels under the transit rails. He's drawing crowds. He's offering food. Whose? Yours, she said without apology. He's intercepting the wagons. I smiled, because some fights announce themselves with a trumpet, and some with a mouthful of stolen bread. Take me to him. The blind levels are where the city forgets its own name. Dripping concrete, the smell of wet metal, the hiss of steam like an animal that hates being touched. We followed the wagon tracks through corridors that used to be maps, and were now guesses. Marin kept pace, eyes adjusting to a darkness with preferences. We found the crowd in a cul-de-sac where the ceiling bowed low, as if the city had bent down to listen. There were hundreds, maybe 1,000, packed tight around a platform made from cratewood and old signage. On it stood a man in a robe the color of old smoke, his face clean in the way only men with mirrors can manage. He held a book with blank pages and spoke into a horn he had stolen from someone more official. "Order," he said, voice sweet as old sin. "Order when the stars lie. Order when the throne sleeps. The new silence demands only that you obey, and you will be fed." The Saint Vigilant didn't die when it fell. It lingered, half submerged, half awake, a cathedral that had forgotten what prayer was for. Steam rose from its broken hull like breath from a wounded giant. People crowded the riverbanks for 3 days, calling it a miracle, a warning, a meal. Every faction claimed it. Every sermon changed its meaning. For me it was a question. Who had steered a dead ship home? We boarded at dusk. The water around the hull shimmered with oil and the rainbow scum of decay. Kess led the Arbits in first, shields raised, visors sealed. Marin followed with the Custos Choir detachment, 3 psychers wrapped in copper mesh. I went last, because someone has to be the one who looks back before walking into a ghost. The ship's ramp hissed as it settled. The sound reminded me of a confession whispered through teeth. Inside, the corridors were lined with etchings, hand-carved prayers gouged into metal. Every surface had been written on, even the ceilings, thousands of lines overlapping until the words blurred into texture. I ran my fingers over one. The grooves were shallow near the top and deep where fingers had broken. The script repeated the same sentence again and again. "He will notice the ones who keep the light." The air tasted of rust and sanctity. The vox picked up murmurs that weren't ours, low and rhythmic, like breathing through a throat full of dust. "Movement?" Kess asked. "No," I said. "Memory." We found the crew in the nav sanctum. They were seated upright, strapped into their consoles, skeletal hands fused to controls by melted bone. Around their necks hung fragments of rosaries welded to the metal. One had a smile carved into her own cheek, Marin whispered. "They didn't die screaming." "No," I said. "They died rehearsing." The Mechanicus team plugged into the ship's data core. The cogitators flickered, spitting out fragments of coordinates and liturgical code. The Vox relay surged with static, then produced a pulse, a single, repeating tone, the same one the astropaths had sung. "Wait." It grew louder until the metal vibrated underfoot. The psychers screamed. One burst a vessel in his eye and collapsed. The tone cut off mid-pulse. For a moment we heard something else beneath it, a whisper shaped like language. "Found you." We withdrew before the ship decided what that meant. Outside, the crowd surged against the barricades. "What did you see?" they demanded. "Is he awake? Is it the angels?" I told them the truth that hurts least. It's empty. They wept anyway, because emptiness can be holy if you need it to be. That night the sky changed color again. A soft aurora flickered across the smog, green, violet, the shades of a bruise healing backward. Astropaths fainted in clusters. Navigators in orbit reported seeing shapes moving between the stars, like candlelight underwater. The Mechanicus called it radiation scatter. The Ecclesiarchy called it divine shimmer. I called it attention. By dawn, half the fleet stationed at Mars had vanished. No explosions, no warp rifts, just gone. Vox traffic dissolved into stuttered fragments. Lights. Moving, can't anchor. Then silence. On the second day, the same lights appeared above Terra's horizon, weaving slow loops like signals no one could decode. I stood with Kess on the palace balcony, watching the sky bleed color. "Ships?" she asked. "Or something wearing the idea of ships," I said. "If the warp has learned imitation, we'll run out of names before we run out of enemies." The High Lords ordered planetary lockdown. The void shields hummed to full strength. Orbital guns angled toward the heavens like supplicants raising their arms. The Ecclesiarchy declared a planetary fast. The Mechanicus called for data. The people lit candles on rooftops so the stars would know which side we were on. And still, the lights moved. 3 nights later, a beam of light descended from orbit and touched the ruins of the Saint Vigilant. The ship answered. Its hull lit from within, not fire but awareness. The etchings glowed. The words began to rearrange themselves, letter by letter, until they spelled a new phrase. "Open the way." I ordered an evacuation of the river district. Few obeyed. Curiosity is the last luxury of the damned. When the beam faded, half the ship was gone, cleanly sliced as if erased. In its place floated motes of light that pulsed like slow heartbeats rising into the clouds. The crowd knelt as one. Even Kess whispered something that might have been prayer. Then came the first reports from orbit. Unknown vessels emerging from behind the moon. Neither Imperial nor Xenos, shapes folding in and out of visibility. The augurs described them as mirrors wrapped in fire. The Adeptus Navy fired warning shots. The lights scattered, regrouped, then descended in patterns too deliberate to be random. The flicker war had begun. We watched the first engagement from the command spire. Orbital guns spat lances of plasma that vanished halfway to target, swallowed by interference. The invaders returned fire, if fire is the word for light that thinks. Beams flickered through void shields like dreams passing through curtains. Ships died without sound, their silhouettes fading into nothing, leaving afterimages that lingered in the eyes. Every time one vanished, the lights in the sky grew brighter. Feeding, maybe. The Mechanicus called for retreat to inner orbit. The Ecclesiarchy broadcast hymns through every frequency. Some civilian pilots tried to join the defense, convinced martyrdom could substitute for munitions. I approved their launch orders, because sometimes faith works best as shrapnel. After 13 hours of combat, the skies went still. Of the 200 ships that had launched, 27 remained. The rest were simply not there. No debris, no radiation, only silence. On the surface, the air pressure changed. Buildings shivered. Vox networks flickered, showing images that weren't transmitted. Faces made of light, mouths moving in unison. I stared at one until it formed words. "We remember what you built." Marin found me later, her voice raw. "What are they?" "Reflections," I said. "Maybe of us." She shook her head. "Then why do they look hungry?" I had no answer that didn't sound like surrender. The governor tried to reclaim control with decrees printed faster than reason. He renamed the curfew the Flicker Vigil. Citizens must remain indoors when the sky glows. Violators to be re-educated. His broadcasts cut between shots of soldiers praying and images of the Saint Vigilant half gone, as if pretending control could restore causality. When I confronted him, he said, "The people need victory." I told him, "Then give them truth. It's cheaper." He didn't understand. They never do. Power spends belief like coin until the mint runs dry. By the 7th night, the lights formed a ring around Terra, pulsing with the slow rhythm of a heart too big to fit inside a world. Astropaths called it a wound in the warp. Navigators called it a map. The Mechanicus called it a frequency lock. The Ecclesiarchy, at last, called it what it was. Judgment. I recorded my log from the roof of the coral spire, the sky above me flickering like a broken cathedral window. "Vox Log 4, I said. "We are fighting light with noise. The Empire of Faith has entered a war it cannot describe. Every weapon we use is an echo of prayer. Every victory feels like disobedience. The throne remains silent, but the dark has learned grammar. Thunder rolled where no clouds should be. The lights shifted, aligning into constellations we did not make. For a moment they formed the shape of the Aquila, then folded it in half. End of log, I said, though the recorder kept running. Some part of me wanted to see what the silence would say next. I used to think miracles were stories told by the desperate to make hunger holy. Now, I'm not sure anymore. The flicker war ended without ending. The lights simply retreated beyond the moon, leaving behind a sky that felt watched. Terra was still alive, but life had started to sound wrong. Machinery hummed in minor keys. Prayers echoed before they were spoken. Even the wind carried rhythm, as though the air had learned to imitate liturgy. The governor declared victory. The Ecclesiarchy declared gratitude. The Mechanicus declared diagnostic recalibration. None of them declared the truth. That victory is just what you call a reprieve, when you've run out of words for survival. I called it breathing for now. I spent the following days in the lower wards, where the real empire still pretended to exist. People were rebuilding cathedrals out of scrap, shaping icons from the refuse of manufactorums. They didn't wait for approval. They didn't wait for priests. Faith had gone feral. At first, I tried to stop them. The Ordo demands control over devotion. Chaos grows fastest in the soil of imagination. But what I saw in those makeshift shrines wasn't corruption. It was anatomy. The Imperium's body, amputated of command, growing new limbs out of memory. Children painted saints on metal sheets with ash and oil. Some of the faces were wrong. One had no eyes but smiled in the way only forgiveness does. Another had too many hands, all open. When I asked who they were, the children said, "They came back." I thought they meant statues. I was wrong. The first living saint appeared in Hive Callion, 3 sectors north. A woman named Selene Kaur, once a laborer, now something else. Witnesses said she walked into the middle of a riot, and the crowd stopped shouting because the air grew warm around her. They said she healed a man's broken leg by asking him to stand. The administratum sent clerks. The arbits sent guns. I sent myself. By the time I arrived, her followers filled the streets. Thousands, kneeling in the gray dust, whispering her name as if it could plug the hole where the Astronomicon used to be. She stood atop an old transit pylon, barefoot, her skin covered in soot and script. Not tattooed. Burned, as if words had chosen her as parchment. I expected madness. I found clarity. Inquisitor Vale, she said before I introduced myself. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. You came to decide whether I am a saint or a sin. I came to decide whether you're dangerous, I said. We all are, she answered. The difference is in the direction. Her followers cheered. I heard devotion in the pitch, sharp, obedient, hungry. I asked what she wanted. Nothing, she said. The Emperor's light fell, but his breath remains. It moves through us. It finds new lungs. Breath can carry disease, I told her. She smiled, patient as fire. And warmth. I ordered her detained. Not executed, not yet. Even the Ordo knows better than to martyr an idea while it's still naming itself. She went willingly, without fear, without arrogance. In her holding cell, she asked for water, not prayer. When she drank, she whispered to it, and the surface rippled against the metal cup. Tricks, I said. Echoes, she replied. When the throne fell silent, the warp listened back. Not everything it heard was cruel. That night, Marin watched her through the glass. She glows, she said. She burns, I corrected. We just haven't measured the temperature yet. But Selene did not burn out. Over the next 3 days, people outside the coral spire began reporting visions. A warmth in their rooms, a whisper in their sleep. Breathe, and you will be seen. When they woke, some found symbols drawn on their walls in soot. The same words branded on Selene's skin. Light survives in lungs. Kess urged me to end it. You can't let this spread, she said. People are ready to believe anything that looks back at them. Maybe that's better than nothing looking at all, I said. She slammed her gauntlet against the table. That's how cults start. And how empires start, I replied. The line between them is the direction of the prayer. The next morning, Selene was gone. Her cell was locked, guards unbroken, surveillance static. On the floor where she had stood, ash shaped into a human outline, lips open. The Vox sensors registered a pulse of heat before cooling. No trace of teleport or warp breach. Just absence that smelled faintly of iron and rain. Hours later, reports flooded in from 3 separate hives. People claiming to have seen her walking through the streets, barefoot, touching the dying and making them gasp once more. Each description matched, down to the ash on her skin. But none of the sightings occurred at the same time. The ecclesiarchy declared her heretic. The populace called her saint of breath. The Mechanicus tried to scan her miracles and found interference similar to warp harmonics but cleaner. For once, they sounded frightened. I didn't chase her. Not yet. You don't chase fire through a city of kindling, you watch where it spreads first. Meanwhile, the choir reported something stranger. The astropaths had resumed faint transmissions. Faint, rhythmic, identical to human breath. They claimed it wasn't from the Astronomicon, nor from any known system. It feels near, one said before ceasing. Marin begged me to record less and rest more. You look hollow, she said. So does the galaxy, I answered. It's a matching set. We found another saint 2 days later. This one a child no older than 10, found in the ruins of a Hab block fire, no burns on his skin, though the flames had eaten everything else. When questioned, he said only, "She taught me how." How what? I asked. To exhale. When he did, the candle near his bed flared and burned blue. By then, it was clear. Something was learning through us. Something that had watched the Emperor's fall and decided to wear our shape. Not chaos. Or at least, not the chaos we knew. This felt orderly, intentional, as if the warp itself were rediscovering curiosity. Kess wanted to purge the hives. The ecclesiarchy demanded mass penance. The Mechanicus prepared containment rituals disguised as experiments. I did none of it. I went back to the river where the Saint Vigilant had fallen and sat among the ashes. The water was low. Bits of metal glimmered beneath the current, humming faintly when touched. I placed my recorder on the bank. Vox log 5, I said. There are saints again. Not canonized by decree, but by recognition. They breathe, and the air listens. If faith is contagious, then maybe we were never immune. Thunder rolled. Above the palace. Not storm, but pressure, like lungs testing themselves. I looked up and saw lights forming in the clouds again. Not the cold shimmer of the flicker war, but warmer, pulsing. The shape they drew wasn't the Aquila this time. It was a pair of lungs, glowing faintly gold. I should have ordered the guns to fire. Instead, I watched until the light faded, Selen's last words to me replayed in my head. He isn't gone. He's everywhere we inhale. For the first time since the throne fell silent, I found myself breathing slower. Not in peace, in recognition. Something vast and patient had found a new rhythm, and it was using ours. I don't know if that's salvation or infection. Maybe it's both. The first transmission came at dawn. If dawn still means anything when the sun rises behind ash, it wasn't a voice. It was rhythm. 5 pulses, pause, 2 pulses, pause, then one long tone that felt like being stared at. The Mechanicus called me from the Vox array chambers, faces hidden behind incense masks, hands shaking from excitement or fear. There's no difference anymore. It's coming from beneath the throne, the senior Magos said. Not from orbit, not from the warp. Beneath. They showed me the readouts. The signal repeated across frequencies no one had tuned in millennia. Old, ancient channels used before the Great Crusade. Before Terra forgot how to talk to itself. The translation algorithm turned pulses into syllables, syllables into fragments, fragments into words. The first phrase made the cogitators overheat. Do not repair the light. The Magos whispered. It speaks in code we never wrote. Outside, the air trembled. I could feel the vibration in my teeth. People in the lower hive said their prayers came back as echoes, perfectly timed, perfectly reversed. I wanted to dismiss it as interference. Then I heard the same pulse through the walls of the coral spire, faint but deliberate. The signal was no longer content to stay buried. I convened a council. Ecclesiarchy, Mechanicus, Arbits, even the governor. We sat around a table older than all of us, its surface carved with 1,000 signatures of men who thought they mattered. I asked the Magos to play the signal again. The tones filled the room like the heartbeat of a machine trying to remember how to live. The ecclesiarch flinched. It's demonic, he said. The Magos shook his head. It's too precise. Chaos sings in hunger. This sings in purpose, the governor's voice quivered. What if it's him? Silence. The word him landed like a nail through the floor. I said, if it is, he's changed his grammar. We argued until the lights flickered and the power grids hummed in sympathy with the signal. The city began to pulse. Fans, Vox units, even servo skulls. Everything moving in rhythm with that buried tone. The Magos stared at his auspex. It's rewriting frequency architecture, he whispered. Resonance is becoming instruction. I ordered all transmitters shut down. He refused. If we stop listening, he said, we lose the pattern. And if we keep listening? I asked. He smiled, the smile of a man too close to revelation. Then we learn what we built. That night, the first suicides occurred among the choir custos. Not despair, devotion. They carved the signal pattern into their flesh, pulsed it through the floor with their dying breath, and vanished before they hit the ground. Vanished, not burned, not disintegrated. Gone, leaving behind shadows shaped like exclamation marks. Marin found me watching the tapes. They're trying to go somewhere, she said. Or something's calling them home, I replied. The signal spread. Manufactorums began producing shapes not listed in their blueprints. Spirals, crescents, plates engraved with unreadable script. Workers claimed their tools moved on their own, correcting mistakes before they happened. The Mechanicus declared it holy recursion. The ecclesiarchy called it heresy. Both were right. On the 5th day, a new pulse replaced the old one. This time it formed words every Vox could catch, every skull could understand. He breathes below. We traced the source deeper, beneath the palace foundations, into tunnels sealed since the Unification Wars. The Magos begged for access. The ecclesiarch refused. What lies below the throne is sacred. So is rot, I said. I took a squad of Arbits, 3 Mechanicus adepts, and Marin. We descended through dust and history, past murals of wars fought before stars had names. The air grew heavier, wetter, humming through bone. At the lowest gate, we found an old maintenance seal, half melted, stamped with a symbol I had never seen. The Aquila inverted, wings folded inward. Break it, I said. The Magos obeyed. The chamber beyond was enormous, circular, walls covered in cables as thick as bodies. In the center stood a machine shaped like a heart. Its surface cracked, leaking light that wasn't light but motion. Inside it we saw figures, not forms but impressions, like reflections in oil. They pulsed in rhythm with the signal. Marin whispered, "What are they?" "The prayers that never arrived," I said. The Magos knelt, weeping metallic tears. "He's dreaming," he said. "The Emperor never died. He's still sending instructions through the architecture. We built him into the machine and now he's rewriting the script." The heart pulsed. A voice filled the room, not through sound but through pressure. It said one word, carved directly into the inside of my skull. "Undo." Marin fell to her knees, screaming. The Arbits opened fire reflexively, lost rounds vanishing into the air like words swallowed by silence. The Magos tore his own vocal cords trying to answer the voice. I pulled him away, but his flesh was already crystallizing into metal. We fled. The tunnels collapsed behind us or folded, I can't tell anymore. When we reached the surface, every clock on Terra stopped for 7 seconds, then resumed as if nothing had happened. The Magos survived only long enough to whisper his last confession. It's not him speaking through the machine. It's the machine speaking through what's left of him. I ordered the palace quarantined. The ecclesiarchy tried to burn the data. Too late. The pulse had embedded itself into every vox, every servo skull, every prayer device in the city. The people began humming it unconsciously, their voices aligning into the same rhythm. At night, from the balcony of the coral spire, I listened. The city's glow blinked in perfect intervals. Windows, candles, fires, all breathing together. The signal had become faith. Not asked for, not understood, simply obeyed. I recorded my report in whisper, Vox Log 6. The scripture is broken. The words have reversed. Machines pray now. Men repeat. The architect of the throne still stirs, but not as God, as code. Behind me, the sky shimmered, faint letters forming among the stars. Lines of transmission looping back to their origin. They spelled nothing I recognized. I asked aloud, what happens when the prayer outlives the believer? No answer, only another pulse. Long, short, short, long. The same as before. The city whispered it back in perfect unison. Terra has stopped pretending it's one city. From orbit, what little orbit remains, you can see it fracturing. Zones of light divided by kilometers of blackout. Rival enclaves glowing like constellations that no longer trust each other. Every governor, every cardinal, every warlord with a tower and a voice has decided that if the throne is silent, then silence means permission. The Imperium has turned into a choir singing different songs in the same ruin. The first breakaway called itself the Dominion of Saint Fire. They lit half of Hive, Galvanus with torches and burned the Administratum, archives so that history couldn't argue with them. Their banners show an open hand with a flame in the palm, obedience without hierarchy, they say. But the flames need feeding. They burn heretics to stay bright, and when they run out of heretics, they invent new definitions. South, the Magi of the Forge Compact sealed themselves into manufactorums and started printing scripture in steel. They claim the signal beneath the throne is the Emperor evolving into machine, and they will finish the work. Their cities hum with endless chant. The air smells of copper blood. When you walk near their borders, your augmetics twitch as if they want to crawl home. The ecclesiarchy's remnants call me traitor. Maybe they're right. I do not serve any of the empires rising from this corpse. My oath was to humanity, and humanity has broken into dialects. Kess keeps the Arbites moving from sector to sector, not as enforcers anymore, but as translators. A badge means nothing when every street has its own law. We carry water, food, medicine. We carry rumors of a world that still remembers how to share. Sometimes the rumors are enough to keep people from killing each other for an hour. Marin records everything. She says documentation is the only form of prayer that still works. Her voice has changed. Quieter, slower, like she's afraid words themselves might go extinct. We travel through cities that call themselves holy, but smell like rust and cooking oil. Everywhere we go, someone is worshipping something that used to be logistics. At dusk, we reach the border of the Dominion. Their guards stop us, faces painted with ash, eyes reflecting the firelight. The leader bows low, the way zealots do when they haven't yet decided whether to kneel or kill. "The Inquisitor is welcome," he says, "but he must bring an offering of confession." His breath stinks of incense and smoke. I tell him confession is an offering I gave once and never got back. He laughs and lets us through. Faith respects arrogance when it recognizes itself. Inside, the Dominion looks like a memory of civilization drawn by someone who ran out of light. Cathedrals built from stacked shipping crates, scripture scrawled on walls with blood and soot. The people sing while they work, endless hymns repeating the same line. Fire remembers. Children play with bones carved into dice. Their laughter is bright, almost innocent, until you notice the rhythm. It matches the pulse from beneath the throne. We find the Dominion's leader in a hall lined with rusted mirrors. She is tall, wrapped in a robe of burned fabric. Her skin glows faintly, like embers that refuse to die. "Inquisitor Vale," she says. "You arrived just in time for coronation." Behind her stands a throne made of melted weapons. I tell her thrones don't interest me anymore. "Then you've forgotten what they're for," she says. "They remind the sky who's in charge." I ask how she keeps her city fed. "Trade," she says. "The Magi below send us metal. We send them silence." She sees my confusion and smiles. "We burn the old tongues. Every book, every record. They say the signal grows stronger when we erase the words that used to define it." "And you believe them?" "I don't have to," she says. "It works." I ask to see her shrine. She leads me to a chamber where the walls sweat heat. In the center hangs a globe of molten glass, pulsing faintly with light that looks alive. Around it, priests whisper in shifts, synchronizing breath. I recognize the pattern. 5 short pulses, 1 long. The signal, the same that told us to undo. She sees me notice. "It's not blasphemy," she says. "It's instruction. We are undoing the wrong parts." "Which parts are those?" "The ones that die." I step closer. The heat claws at my skin. Inside the glass, something moves. A shape like a hand pressing from within. It's smaller than a god should be. But gods start small. When we leave, Marin won't speak. Her face shines with sweat and disbelief. "It's learning through them," she says. "It's using faith as a testing ground." "Everything uses faith," I answer. "That's why it works." We leave before the next hymn cycle. Behind us, the city chants until the smoke hides the stars. 2 weeks later, we reach the Forge Compact. The transition is violent. Ash roads turning into metal. Human chatter replaced by machine chorus. Skitari patrols march in perfect rhythm. Eyes blank, weapons down. They don't stop us. Maybe they've already scanned every thought in our heads. The Magos Prime receives me in a chamber shaped like a lung, tubes exhaling steam with every breath. His voice comes through speakers implanted in his throat. "The Imperium fractured because it relied on faith," he says. "We rely on instruction." "What about the soul?" I ask. He tilts his head, servo joints hissing. "The soul is a design flaw. We're correcting it." He shows me his latest project. A replica of the Golden Throne, smaller, suspended in a field of magnetic light. Inside it, a human heart beats slowly, wired to a machine that hums in perfect rhythm with the planetary signal. "We have extracted the pattern of divinity," he says. "Soon we will produce more. Millions if the materials hold." "And what happens when they start thinking?" I ask. He doesn't answer. Machines don't understand rhetorical questions. That night, Kess finds me staring at the replica through a viewport. "We could destroy it," she says. "It would just rebuild," I tell her. "It doesn't need them anymore. It has the pattern." She spits on the floor. "Then why are we still fighting?" "Because we remember why we started." She laughs once, no humor, and walks away. Days later, the compact collapses from within. One of the artificial hearts pulses out of sync, emitting a burst of light that turns steel to glass and glass to sand. The explosion consumes the manufactorums, freezing workers mid-breath, their faces preserved in molten metal. From orbit, it looks like a flower of amber blooming in the dark. The Magi call it ascension. I call it proof. The signal changes again. Now it carries fragments of human speech woven through static. The words are distorted, layered, impossible to separate, until one repeats enough to be understood. Still building. The Dominion interprets it as encouragement. They double their fires. Other cities answer with new creeds, louder hymns, more sacrifices. Every empire interprets the same message as validation. None ask whether the builder they serve remembers what he was building for. The High Lords of Terra, what remains of them, retreat into the palace and seal all gates. No one sees them again. Rumor says their last act was to connect every shrine, every manufactorum, every relay to the same network. To unify the voice of mankind. The moment they do, half the planet's Vox arrays overload. The hum returns, louder than ever. Marin records it in her log. We have become our own choir. I travel again, city to city, each calling itself the last hope of order. The banners change, the prayers change, but the faces remain the same. Exhausted, hungry, still believing in anything that sounds like leadership. In the northern hives, I meet a governor who styles himself Emperor of Dust. He wears a crown made from fractured armor plating, sits on a throne of sandbags, and rules a population of 30,000. He has coins with his face on them, stamped by hand. The Empire lives, he tells me, because I remember what it looked like. I ask him what he'll do when the coins run out. He shrugs. Melt them down. Make bullets. I don't kill him. Men like him burn themselves eventually. At night I dream of the heart beneath the throne, pulsing in the dark. Sometimes it beats slower, sometimes faster. Sometimes I think it's waiting for a signal I haven't sent yet. Vox Log 7. We have become architects of ruins that call themselves nations. The Imperium was never one empire. It was billions of agreements not to collapse at the same time. Now those agreements are dust. Every leader builds a miniature throne. Every throne breeds its own worship, and every worship forgets the shape of mercy. The lights in the sky flicker again tonight. They no longer look like weapons. They look like eyes, blinking in slow rhythm. Perhaps they're watching to see which empire learns humility first. Perhaps they're deciding which one to eat. Faith survives. That is its cruelty. It does not die when gods do. It migrates, like smoke looking for a ceiling. We keep walking. They called themselves the Faithless as a dare. Like men lighting cigarettes outside a munitions dump to prove the night wouldn't punish them. I found them at the edge of the ash flats where Terra forgets its palaces and remembers it was once a killing field. The sky there is the color of welded metal, and the horizon looks sharpened. Their camp was a geometry of necessity. Tarps stenciled with faded regimental codes, cookfires burning ammunition crates, cots aligned like parade ground ghosts. No icons, no purity seals, not even a weathered aquila turned to face the wind. The only banners were laundry lines, shirts, socks, strips of gauze, and the smell of broth thick with bone. They saluted Kess out of habit, me out of curiosity. Their commander, a woman whose scars formed a map of every order she'd survived, introduced herself as Colonel Novik. Her voice had a rasp that came from drinking air that had traveled through ash. Inquisitor, she said, neither deferent nor defiant. We heard you were collecting lost causes. Behind her, men and women with weary eyes ate from tin bowls and watched me the way stray dogs watch a stranger's hand. We're collecting roads that still go anywhere, I said. I was told you fight without prayers. Prayers are expensive, she said, and the quartermaster's dead. They had been the 93rd Varus line once, though the number didn't matter anymore. Numbers belonged to ledgers and graves. They'd defected from a procession of bishops who'd tried to turn them into a marching sermon. We were tired of dying as punctuation, Novik said, so we rewrote the sentence. Their oath was written on their mess tent in charcoal. We don't believe, we remember. It was not a rejection of the Emperor as much as a refusal to rent him. If he's listening, a trooper told me as he oiled a laser gun with a rag that had been a child's shirt, he can hear us fine without the shouting. They took me on patrol that night because war is the only introduction soldiers respect. We crossed the flats with our lamps hooded, boots sinking into dust that used to be architecture. The sky scratched itself with dry lightning, but no rain came. Kess moved among them like someone learning a second language. Hand signals, taps, glances. Marin walked near the rear, recording quietly. The red lens of her servo quill dimmed to a coal. Orcs had been seen in the refinery spires beyond, drawn to the noise of the flicker war and the promise of salvage. But the Auspex ghosted with other signatures too. Warped, stuttered pings that didn't belong to anything that evolved in a sane universe. The Faithless had learned to use both problems as solutions. Orcs hate puzzles, Novik said. Chaos loves them. We arrange introductions. We sighted the refinery at dawn, a forest of pipes and catwalks tangled like an iron lung. Smoke leaked from cracked stacks in long sighs. Novik raised 2 fingers. The line melted into cover that would insult the word. I saw them become scenery. Pauses in rubble, shadows that didn't insist on themselves. It takes years to learn that kind of humility. The first orcs appeared on the catwalk like a rumor made of meat. Green, loud, eager for the simple arithmetic of smashing. The Faithless did not open fire. They waited until something else arrived. A shimmer along the far gantry. like heat above snow, coalescing into shapes with too many angles. Warp things, thin as blades and hungry for edges. They cut the air as they moved. The orcs saw enemies and charged, roaring in joy at the chance to simplify the morning. The warp things met them like bad grammar, slicing charges into commas. Blood sprayed and evaporated. The air rang like a misfired hymn, now, Novik said. Her squads rose and shot, not at bodies, but at bridges. Bolts chewed through support pins. Lasfire stitched lines across load-bearing plates. A catwalk dropped, shearing the fight in half. The orcs and the blades turned on each other again, confused and insulted. The faithless shifted fire toward valves. Promethium geysered, and the refinery coughed flame. Heat rolled over us. The warp things wavered, their edges blurring under the sudden density of reality. The orcs roared louder, because everything is victory until you run out of breath. We advanced. Kess took the left with a breacher team, smashing a door that didn't know it was sentimental. Marin slipped after me with her pistol held wrong on purpose. She had learned that guns are for punctuation, not sentences. We reached a maintenance platform where a larger warp thing curled like a question mark, its surface reflecting futures that hurt to look at. It turned toward me, and for an instant I saw my own face on its skin, but older, wearing a crown of wires. The thing laughed without sound. I did not invoke the Emperor. I invoked momentum. 3 shots, center mass, then a step forward that the thing didn't expect because belief prefers distance. Kess's shock maul hit where my shots had softened. Light spit from the impact like bad prayers. Novik's Vox barked ranges, angles, names. The faithless moved with the beautiful selfishness of people who refuse to die for someone else's sentence. The warp thing unfolded into absence and took my reflection with it. When it ended, the refinery sagged and groaned as if relieved to be less complicated. Orc bodies smoked. Warp stains peeled off steel like skin after a burn. We took what fuel we could siphon and set the rest alight. We don't hold, Novik said. Holding teaches you to worship geography. We move. Back at camp, the faithless ate without ceremony. They didn't sing. They didn't toast the dead. They named them. Each name spoke once, plainly. And the person who had loved them most took their spoon and finished their bowl. It was the most honest wake I've seen. What do you tell your recruits? I asked Novik later, as we watched the orange glow of the refineries dying. That we are not less without a throne, she said. We're heavier. We carry each other. And when belief offers the lighter load, she smiled with the dry mouth of a woman who has buried jokes. We remind them that light loads are usually empty. Marin sat with a medic named Ives, who stitched a gash in her forearm she hadn't noticed. He told her stories of the regiment's patron saint, who wasn't a saint at all. Just an old quartermaster who could make boots out of curtains. The Emperor sent us miracles for 10,000 years, Ives said, and no one taught us how to make our own. Turns out it's the same recipe, just fewer candles. I walked the lines. Soldiers slept with rifles under their chins and drawings tucked into their breastplates. Dogs, rivers, a sun no one had seen clearly in years. One man had tattooed his child's name on his palm, so he would see it every time he pulled a trigger. Another had carved the words, "Don't make me a story," into the stock of his gun. I wanted to tell him there is no mercy in anonymity. Then I remembered that sometimes anonymity is the only mercy left. At midnight, a runner arrived, panting, bearing a strip of canvas stamped with the seal of the Confessor of Ash. His handwriting was elegant and venomous. "You fight without kneeling, Inquisitor. How inspiring. Send me your wounded, and I will heal them. All I require is that they learn the first sacrament, obedience." He signed it with a flourish that smelled like smoke. Novik snorted. "He'll get no meat from these bones." I burned the letter unread by anyone else. Some offers are traps, even when you ignore them. 2 days later, we hit a convoy belonging to the Forge Compact. Servitors dragging sleds of machine-bright components toward a sunken rail line. They fought without fear because fear is an organ they had sold. We shot the joints and the command skulls. The bodies folded like apologizing chairs. Among the cargo we found cages. Inside were 6 civilians wired into frames, eyes open, mouths sewn with copper thread in stitches shaped like vows. Their chests rose and fell in time with a hum I recognized from beneath the throne. We cut the wires. The hum stuttered. Somewhere, a distant machine missed a beat. One woman inhaled like surf, coughed out blood and whispered, "Don't fix it." Then she died. The others convulsed, then slept as if memory had been a fever. Marin cataloged the hardware with hands that shook. Kess wanted to torch the lot and call the ash absolution. Novik shook her head. "We salvage," she said. "If we start burning everything that remembers us, we won't have anything left to use." That night the faithless held a lesson for the newest recruits. Not a sermon, a drill. They marched in silence, then in noise. then to the arrhythmic beat of a drum that sped and slowed without warning. "The world won't keep time for you," Novik told them. "Make your own cadence and carry it." A boy asked if they would ever pray again. Novik considered. "We already do," she said. "We just don't expect answers." At dawn, we found footprints around the perimeter. Bare, small, ash-smeared. Selene Kor's mark, the Saint of Breath, or whatever she had become since she dissolved into rumors. On a rock near the mess, someone had traced lungs with 2 fingers and written in soot, "Light survives in lungs." The faithless ignored it politely, the way you ignore a polite stranger at your own kitchen table. I recorded a log behind a supply crate. "Vox Log 8, I said. "We have found an army that fights for the only thing left that can be saved. Us. They speak of memory instead of destiny. They bury their dead without asking anyone's permission. In their silence I can hear a shape that isn't surrender. The empire that survives might not need a throne. It might need a mess tent and a stubborn refusal to die on principle." The summons came at dawn, written on parchment that smelled of blood and incense. The seal was ecclesiarchal, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. Too elegant for bureaucracy, too careful for faith. It read simply, "Inquisitor Vale, by command of the Council of Terra's Faith, you are ordered to account for your words and works before the Synod of the Remaining." I almost laughed. Even in ruin, the ecclesiarchy had found a way to reassemble its courtroom. Kess said it was a trap. Marin said it was an opportunity. I said it was both. We rode through streets that looked like verdicts written in smoke. The banners of a dozen faiths hung from the same spires, each claiming ownership of the same sky. The crowds watched us pass with curiosity too polite to be trust. The Synod met in the ruins of the Basilica of Eternal Certainty, an irony only history could appreciate. The roof was gone, the saints had melted, and the floor was littered with the bones of pews. But someone had rebuilt the dais, and someone else had filled the benches with priests, governors, and machine priests pretending to be neutral. A tribunal of zeal and exhaustion. The presiding hierarch was an old man with eyes like wet paper. He wore the robes of an ecclesiarch, but not the confidence. "Inquisitor Darian Vale," he said. "You stand accused of apostasy, dereliction, and the propagation of heretical mercy." "Mercy," I said, "is a strange crime. It is when it replaces obedience." They recited my sins, dismantling the scaffold at Galvanus, consorting with the Saint of Breath, refusing to sanctify executions, protecting the faithless legion, investigating the machine beneath the throne without sanction. Each charge sounded like a poem written by someone who had mistaken survival for defiance. When they finished, I asked, "Do I get to plead, or do we skip straight to the part where you set yourselves on fire to keep the sky impressed?" A murmur rippled through the hall. The hierarch raised his hand. "Your wit does not absolve you. The Imperium survives on order." "No," I said. "It survived on fear, and fear finally ran out of fuel." They called witnesses. A governor, trembling behind his medals, described how my presence encouraged civil disobedience. A priest claimed I redefined faith as endurance. A magos accused me of interrupting divine calculus. Each spoke the truth, in the only language they knew, the dialect of ownership. Then they brought in someone I hadn't expected, Novik, commander of the Faithless. Her armor was scorched, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. She bowed to the tribunal and then to me, not as respect, but as recognition. "This man," she said, "taught us nothing we didn't already know." He only said it aloud. "Would you call him faithful?" the hierarch asked. "I'd call him consistent," she said. "In this age, that's rarer than miracles." They dismissed her. Her words hung in the air, unwanted and unforgettable. The next witness was worse. They wheeled in a cage wrapped in chains and incense. Inside, bound and bleeding, sat the confessor of ash. His robes were torn, his book burned to a black slab in his lap. Even now he smiled. "You see," he crooned, "the sinner and the saint share the same silence. That is his crime. He speaks with the same mouth as the gods." I asked, "And yours?" "Mine listens better." They called for recess after that. The priests prayed. The magi conferred in static. Kess stood beside me, hand on her maul, ready for the verdict to be a firing line. Marin sat behind us, recording every breath. "They'll kill you," she said softly. "If not for heresy, then for rhythm. You sound too alive." "Then I'll make sure the last sound they hear is human," I said. When the tribunal reconvened, the hierarch's voice trembled like old glass. "Do you repent?" "Of what?" I asked. "Of replacing faith with memory." I looked at the crowd. Priests with tired eyes. Soldiers pretending not to listen. Citizens peering through cracks in the walls. "If faith means believing what we're told, then yes, I repent. But if faith means refusing to let despair finish the story, then no. I stand by every word. The hierarch rose. Then the verdict is clear. You will be— He didn't finish. The Vox systems in the basilica came alive with static. Every device, every servitor, every machine capable of sound began to hum the buried pulse. 5 short tones, 1 long. The same signal that had haunted us since the throne went silent. The same voice that told us to undo. The floor shook. The icons trembled. The stained glass that still clung to the walls glowed faintly. Images shifting into shapes no creed had sanctioned. The hum became a whisper. Words formed from vibration. Enough. The hierarch clutched his head, blood running from his nose. The magi screamed equations that dissolved into laughter. The confessor of ash began to pray in the same tone, echoing the signal like a lover repeating a name. His cage shattered. He stood, arms raised, eyes white with revelation. He forgives, he shouted. He forgives by forgetting. Then his body came apart like sand in water. Chaos erupted. Priests fled. Soldiers fired at shadows. Kess dragged me toward the exit. Marin kept the recorder running, her voice shaking. Log continues. Terra, Basilica of Eternal Certainty, mass psychic event, subjective time dilation. The pulse— Static swallowed her words. Outside, the sky bled light. Letters of fire crawled across the clouds, dissolving faster than they formed. The city below answered in kind. Windows flickering, candles synchronizing, people dropping to their knees or standing in defiance. It didn't matter. For the first time in centuries, Terra breathed as one organism. The hierarch stumbled after us, clutching the relic of his office. "He's returning!" he screamed. "The Emperor lives." "No," I said. "Something lives." That's not the same thing. Behind us, the basilica collapsed inward, the sound like lungs exhaling for the last time. A column of light rose from the ruins, spreading across the sky in a pattern that matched no scripture, no code. It was beautiful, and it hurt to look at. We regrouped near the spire. The faithless were already there, weapons ready, faces grim. "What now?" Novik asked. "We just watched God shed his skin." "Then we find out what's underneath," I said. That night, the air tasted of copper and confession. The hum faded, replaced by a silence too deliberate to be peace. Kess sat beside me, armor scorched, eyes distant. "You should have died in there," she said. "I think I did," I answered. Marin closed her recorder. "Then what's this?" she asked. "Afterlife," I said. Chapter 9, Vox Log 9. The trial is over. The verdict is unspoken. The Empire no longer prosecutes heresy. It manufactures new definitions of it. Whatever spoke through the machines has rewritten judgment in its own grammar. The question now isn't whether the Emperor is alive. It's whether we deserve to be.